We move on to the last event. I'm very glad to have Professor John Benington. Unfortunately, again, Rosalind Marsden, she's not with us here, but she will be on Zoom making comments on what Justin Gordon-Muortat is going to speak on behalf of the Ibba school girl. Okay.
Slightly, but Rosalind can
but
still.
Also she will.
She can chip in.
And then we'll have question and answer. So may I ask Justin, please?
Sure. Hi, Rosalind, and hi, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, for, as always, hosting us. And I enjoyed today's discussion. Our little contribution here, obviously, it's in line of Ibba girls. And I think many of you know Ibba girls. It's in a place called Ibba in Western Equatoria. It's a school that was set up roughly 11 years ago by our very own Professor John Benington and Bridget Nogomoro, a very able South Sudanese who came to the UK. I think she met John in Juba when John was doing a public service sort of lecture, and she was one of the recipients of the event. And she interacted well with John and told John she comes from an area, a very remote area of South Sudan that produced her, and considering that is so remote, she was able to get an education, and she attributed that to her dad and appealed to John, if you can help me. And John, being a very industrious human being, a very benevolent person, took the challenge on. And today, 11 years later, Ibba is the best performing primary school in South Sudan. It has consecutively done so for 5 years or more. And we're currently branching into the possibility of graduating the seniors. So literally, we went from primary school literally all the way to senior school. I've been one of the trustees for the last 4 years. Myself and Martin and Golda Abe and Pamela Lamoro and others have tried to do our bit, and I think even Al-Hajj and Madame Rosemary have been involved. Many South Sudanese have been involved. It's come a long way, and it's still going a long way. It's been liaising with lots of the powers that be in education to try to roll out and cut and paste or emulate the success that is Ibba around South Sudan. And not wanting to talk too much, you probably know a bit about us already. I want to pass to Dame Rosalind to kick off with this presentation with Professor John. Yeah, go ahead, Rosalind.
Thank you very much, Justin, and I'm very pleased to have been able to listen to the previous discussion. I'm sorry not to be with you in person today, but I just flew in a couple of hours ago from Addis Ababa, where Sudan's democratic civilian forces who want to end the war and restore the democratic path have just had a very important meeting. But this afternoon, I'm here to talk about a different subject, which is recent developments in the struggle for education, especially for girls in South Sudan. And I've been asked just to say a few words about the broader national context in order to sort of provide some background to what Justin and John will then say about Ibba Girls' School. And I should just mention that I'm also actually a trustee of the Friends of Ibba Girls Boarding School. So improving schooling in South Sudan is still a continuing struggle, and the reasons for this are quite complex, but just to mention a few of them. First of all, and this links up to what the topic that has been discussed in the last 2 hours, there's the colonial legacy. As you know, for much of the colonial period under the Anglo-Egyptian condominium, the British colonial authorities invested very little in education in southern Sudan. They outsourced education primarily to Christian missionaries who spread the English language to a limited extent, although education was also conducted in the local vernacular languages. And they also combined this with some Christian religious evangelizing. And then the colonial authorities really only began to pay more attention to education in the South in the decade leading up to Sudan's independence in 1956. But the educational provision which the South inherited in 1956 was extremely limited. The second factor, sort of explaining the many challenges faced by education in South Sudan today, of course, is the protracted conflict. Educational opportunities were lost as a result of the long-running civil war since 1955, which meant that generations of South Sudanese went into the bush and lost out on education. And a lot of school infrastructure was also destroyed in the process. Thirdly, poverty means that many families are not able to afford school fees. And although education is supposed to be free, in practice, virtually all schools require parental contributions because they don't have enough money from the government to pay teachers to conduct repairs or even to cover general running costs. And particularly in rural areas, there's also pressure on boys to leave school early, to start earning a living, while girls face pressure to marry at an early age because of the dowry or bride price associated with marriage. And these challenges are compounded by climate crises, particularly severe flooding, which makes it very difficult for children to access schools in the affected areas. So as you will see from the slide, as UNICEF summarized it, years of conflict and political insecurity, extreme poverty, food insecurity, low sectoral capacity, and perennial climate disasters continually hurt the education of children in South Sudan. And for girls, there are additional barriers such as domestic duties, early pregnancy, and patriarchal cultural norms that deprioritize girls' education. So consequently, 2.8 million children are out of school, which is about 60% of the total school-age population. School enrollment is 37.6% for primary and 5.2% for secondary schools. Girls' enrollment is even lower. Very few girls make the transition from primary to secondary school. I think in 2017, it was estimated that less than 3,500 girls would complete 4 years of secondary education. And even for children who are attending school, the quality of education they receive is often below the desired standard. Many teachers are volunteers, and a large proportion are not fully trained. And because of insufficient government funding, teachers' salaries are very low and salary payments are often delayed, which sometimes leads to quite a high rate of teacher absenteeism. Many schools also suffer from a lack of basic teaching and learning materials, including sort of textbooks and exercise books. And there are also safety and health concerns because many schools lack permanent structures, latrines, and access to safe drinking water. Now, the Ministry of General Education has been trying to tackle these issues, but is hampered by an insufficient financial allocation from the national budget. Nevertheless, there have been a few positive developments in recent years. Firstly, the government's budget allocation for the education sector has increased to some extent, although it's still far from sufficient. Secondly, the first South Sudan national curriculum was launched in 2015, and this was intended to promote national identity and cohesion, peace, education, and gender equality. Now, of course, these are all very important values that can be promoted through the education system, but implementation still has some way to go. But this is something that can be built on. And prior to this, there was no comprehensive curriculum in South Sudan, and schools were using a mixture of curricula from Sudan, Kenya, and Uganda. When South Sudan became independent in 2011, English was made the official language, and the new national curriculum requires English to be used as the medium of instruction from primary 4 level onwards. But as we've heard in the previous discussion, in practice, many teachers don't have the language schools to teach in English because they were educated in the Sudanese Arabic education system. And then thirdly, the ministry has adopted strategies to promote girls' education. Although the number is still not so high, nevertheless, more girls are now enrolled in school than at any time since 2011, thanks in part to the Girls' Education in South Sudan programme, known as the GES programme, to which the UK is the largest donor. And this has provided cash transfers to schools it's also tried to raise awareness of the importance of educating girls. So in conclusion, a peaceful and prosperous future for South Sudan depends on raising enrollment levels, improving standards of education, and training the leaders of the next generation. Educated and empowered women can play a transformative role in lifting communities out of poverty, in supporting local peace-building initiatives, and in growing South Sudan's economy. And this is why a school like Ibba Girls Boarding School, which is a community school, it's not a private school for the children of wealthy parents. This is why it's so important in providing a safe space for girls from across Western Equatoria State to receive a high-quality education. The ministry regards Ibba as a centre of excellence and as a national demonstration project, which could potentially be spread across other states. So I'll stop there and I'll hand over now to Justin, who will talk about Ibba Girls School in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Dame Marsden. You're one of our, she's one of our illustrious members of the Ibba Board of Trustees here in the UK as part of FIGS. FIGS is the Friends of Ibba, a charity that was established to support the school. As you could, she's a former Sudanese ambassador as well, British ambassador to the Sudan, and so we're very delighted to have her. She comes with a lot of experience and a lot of enthusiasm, really, and obviously, as you could see, she has a lot of passion for wanting to see changes in our state, and particularly the plight of young girls and the marginalization of women for that factor. So I'll just say a bit more about Ibba. Many of you guys have probably attended many events that we do to fundraise, to promote the school, and you probably followed as well, maybe through the campaigns we do. I think we have a lot of our community, our members, and we're constantly recruiting, because to finance such a school, and again, critics have said, it started off on a very lofty concept and idea, and the school actually is used to be very well funded to a great extent. It is, but because it's expanding, the funds we get now are continuously getting depleted. But in saying that, it's literally produced girls of a high standard in terms of primary school, and again with secondary school. The only difficulties we have is what will happen to the girls next. And Ibba girls, we in FIGS, as well as even our trustees back home, we're supported by people on the ground, and John will give you a highlight on who are involved. But we're also very grateful for the Western Equatoria government, who really have taken the school as their own and have tried really their best to make sure, come what may, even when rebels were on the periphery of Western Equatoria, they were also making sure nobody attacks the school or harms the school, and everybody's been so excited, and these girls are benefiting. At this current juncture, is not a national school. It's mainly recruits from around Ibba and the surrounding areas, as far as Meridian, mainly all of Western Equatoria. Obviously, there's been attempts to try and lobby for the possibility of a similar school, or even Ibba maybe taking 10% nationally. And we've been working with the Ministry of General Education, who have been very supportive. They've actually created a lot of openings and people who could support us. And we are working with various trusts and bodies to try and strengthen the school. But one of the obstacles and difficulties always is how to sustain funding. And as we know, it's difficult for British taxpayers and good wishers to continuously dip their hands in their pocket. But we must commend the likes of John, who have opened all their doors to the school, and literally all their friends have been enlisted to support the school. The school has done magnificently, and like I said, it has also recruited very good teachers and administrators. We've expanded the structure. There's lots of buildings. Even there's a library about to be open, but the classrooms have been extended. Boarding facilities have been extended, and the girls are happy. You'll probably see through the slides John will show you at the moment. They're so excited. They're very vibrant. These are future women who will make big inroads in their country. And so we're very delighted to get this opportunity. I want John to say more. He has a lot of passion for this school. We pray for God to give him more health, and we pray that God blesses Ibba and like similar schools and education and peace in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Justin. I want to say we have nothing to sell, no books to give you, and we're not asking for any money from any of you. We're going to give you money back. So wait for the end. We're going to give you a chance to double your money. So this is an investment opportunity. Now, I'm in a difficult position here. My father was a carpenter. He grew up in Headington, just up the road from here. My mother was a nurse and a midwife. And they went out to the Congo as white missionaries. And I spent my childhood growing up there. So I am the product. I am a white missionary and the son of a white missionary. And I come here challenged every time by good radical thinking, because we know that white missionaries brought some good, but brought an enormous amount of bad. And we value this dialogue, this healthy challenge and healthy dialogue, but we can give back as good as we get. Because while you've been talking, we have helped with the local community, very, very large numbers of people in the local community, to create a drop in the ocean, a tiny, tiny drop in the ocean. But over this last 10-year period, 360 girls between the age of 10 and 18 have got a bit of education, and they feel empowered to go out and to challenge and to transform the world. And they're some of the most radical young women we have ever met. So let's just look at some quick pictures and then let's get to the debate. So there's a group of the women singing and dancing to welcome visitors. That was a group of visitors from the national government who were coming to award prizes. Wonderful music because it's a boarding school. This is girls enjoying education because they have a safe space away from trauma. It's a 100-acre campus. It is secure, not just physically, but emotionally. It's secure physically because it has a wall around it, and it has night patrols of people with torches so that girls can feel safe. But what is most important, they have matrons who live in their dormitories and can hold them when they feel frightened. And they have seen horror beyond horror that no children in the world should be forced to see all over the world. We've had a long-term plan. From the beginning, we worked out with the local community in hours and hours and hours of discussions, discussions that went over days. We worked out a long-term plan that would take us through to 2031. We've reached that phase of the plan on target against all the odds and against any number of challenges. That school has remained open and has got today over 360 girls there. The next stage of the plan is the difficult one, and the one we want to talk about in a little bit more detail, because you need long-term plans. You need to know what you're trying to get to. And that is to support the transition of girls from school through to work. There's absolutely no point in having educated women, well-educated women, educated not just in academic subjects, but with the pen and the hoe in professional, technical, vocational skills that will help them to get jobs. If there is no economy, it's a complete waste of time and of effort if those girls end up back where they were with disappointed hopes. And that's not going to come without some very, very radical action, but not just at the national level. Some of that can be done at the local level. What we're trying to do at the local level is develop the skills, but also the business opportunities. So the school has a 100-acre campus donated by the local community, but a large part of it is a school farm in which girls are currently growing a great deal of food for consumption in the school, but are now developing plans for how to grow crops that are saleable and can create local markets. And there's a whole number of ideas being looked at in great detail with business plans to see whether these are viable. So looking for macadamia nuts. I mean, the place grows mangoes. Mark Peer tells me that no good mango is one that he catches a mango from a tree and it goes straight to the mouth. Now, that does not transport and sell. It's brilliant locally. But the area also grows other things like medicinal herbs and macadamia nuts and things which are transportable. And we actually believe that this area, not just Western Equatorial State, but a little bit further afield, can become the breadbasket of the world through looking seriously in business terms at how you create products that are tradable and sellable, within Africa, within other parts, but also across to Britain and the West. So the idea is that this is a demonstration project, not just for schooling, but for the development of an area. In a sense, it's a community development project and a demonstration project. It's absolutely tiny. It's a drop in the ocean, but the interest that is being shown on it is because people learn by what they see when people do something. And it's quite clear that this project has made mistakes. We're very happy to talk about those mistakes, to learn from those mistakes, and then try to spread that practice through learning and knowledge exchange networks. And there's a whole science behind that. It means that you share that experience horizontally. As Justin said, the aim is that every one of the 10 or even maybe 12 states, you have to be 10, I know is the number, but 12 maybe politically, take it in stages, will come and look at this, learn from the mistakes, and not copy and paste, but graft and transplant. You adapt it to the local culture, the local languages, and of course it's not got to be the same as that. But to do that, you've got to be a group of people who can say, we tried this worked well, this didn't work. Don't do that for God's sake. Watch our mistakes and learn from them. And then I think we know a lot about how you spread knowledge horizontally. That is very different from pushing that knowledge up to the top, hoping that governments will write policies and then trickle them down. How much waste of effort and knowledge comes in that? You know, I've read all the government's policy documents since 2008, when I first started going there. I've read them all, and how many of them get implemented? They're necessary, but they're not sufficient. So we have a long-term plan. Let's just move right through to the last slide, I think, because I want to look. These are some of the achievements. Outstanding results in both primary and secondary exams. Strengthening of local governance, leadership, management and organisation, trying to really educate and train and empower the Black African community to take full responsibility, to break out of the mindset that you talked about. And you and I will talk about Frantz Fanon and how important he is in talking about mindsets. Colonisation of mind, absolutely crucial, and across Algeria too. And we have worked now, we have commissioned and partnered with Windle Trust International, led by David Maswa, who was born in Maridi, is now the executive director of that trust, who can speak plainly and frankly and honestly and challengingly with the local community about getting real and starting to get off their arses and do this stuff. Now, the challenge ahead is how to sustain it. and increase income and support, but we're not asking for a penny of money from you. We want to help school leavers to get education and jobs. We want to finish the site and the school buildings. We want to see the school develop as a hub for the whole local community, for adult education and for social enterprises and business skills, particularly using all these assets in the long vacations. And we want to spread the innovation laterally to other states within South Sudan. And I want to make one final comment. It is exactly that: how does a country change its mindset to turn its supposed deficits into its assets, and to start to do it? So the country has fertile land, unpolluted by mass production farming. It has quite wonderful forests with some of the best teak in the oil and mahogany. Mahogany difficult to transplant, but some of the teak has got an enormous price and value on it. It's got sun, water, rain, and capacity to become the solar-powered breadbasket of the country. And that change in mindset is not going to happen just through the mind, it's going to happen through detailed planning. People who sit down and write serious business plans, who talk about how you're going to get foreign direct investment there. You've got to persuade business people. But you don't just persuade them, you show them. And I hope that this can generate a healthy, vigorous debate. We're ready to take you on. Come on, Justin.
I want to make a comment.
Yes, of course, you chair us.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to follow up John and Justin with an experience how the church can help local people, not government of South Sudan. I was in Turali with Bonham Al-Wag some years back, and with us was Bishop Makram Kissis, the late, Allah yarhamul baraka fikum. He was such a nice man. Bishop Makram Kissis, he is accompanied by a German architect, and the German architect has all his architect equipment, tripod, camera, all measurements. And the idea was that as the bishop moves from one place to another, the local people tell him, not South Sudan government, local say, we need a clinic, we need a community hall, we need a school. And the occasion I was with Bona is to open one of the schools which was built by Bishop Makram Kissis.
Yes.
Bishop Makram Kissis take all the measurements and all the maps for design for a school, and then he goes to America, he goes to Germany, he goes to Italy, raising funds, and built all these. He was so popular, and then the local community, and I said, there is not a single South Sudan officials with us. It is the local people and the bishop. And then he opened a school. And the school, what he said, is in Turali, and it is a wonderful school. It's a square one, it's a beautiful, all these four girls, by the way.
Yeah.
And the four girls came out with their uniform and beautifully performed Dinka dances, and then also recitation of poetry. And thirdly, they raised the flag, and we were shown all these classes all around the thing. And finally, the local community made a lunch. Of course, one has to provide 2 bowls. 2 bowls one has to provide, we have to jump over the bowls. And then we had a lovely lunch. And this is, what to say, the partnership between the church and between the local community. Thank you very much indeed. Or can I ask you please to be very short? Extremely brief. Okay, Rosalind?
Rosalind, do you want to pick some of the questions?
Well, just on the question of, the government's contribution, I think as John said, I mean, in preparing for this afternoon, I read, quite a lot of their policy and strategy papers, all of which, are pretty impressive. But when it comes to implementation, of course, there's a massive problem over the very limited financial allocation that the education sector receives. But this is education is an area which has been really prioritised by the international community and international donors, UN agencies. I mean, UNICEF in particular has made a big contribution to trying to support teacher training and distribution of textbooks. WFP has got a big school feeding program, because many children have been coming to school without having had any breakfast or not getting any food at school. Then they can't really be able, they can't be expected to learn properly. And then there are sort of non-governmental organisations, particularly Windle Trust International, which has been doing a lot of very valuable work in terms of trying to support in-service professional development for teachers who have not had very much a very developed education themselves, but are keen to polish their professional skills. So, I mean, I think the Ministry of General Education has been sort of willing to adopt the broad general guidelines, but really in a number of areas, it's been the international agencies and the NGOs who have been there to actually implement a lot of it. So obviously it is very important to, and I think this is what some of the international actors are doing, to continue to urge the government of South Sudan to increase, its budget allocation for basic services. Obviously, health is the other really key area, but education must be a much, much higher priority if the country is to move forward. And I very much hope that although Ibba obviously has been a sort of model that has benefited from significant funding, external funding raised through the Friends of Ibba Girls' School, it has shown what can be achieved if you can bring trained teachers together and provide the right kind of environment. So, I mean, I think I would echo what John said. We would really hope that some of the lessons from Ibba could be taken and applied in other states in South Sudan, so that it's not just in Western Equatoria, but in other areas too, that some of the good aspects of the Ibba experience can be sort of built upon.
Thank you, Rosalind, very much indeed.
On Tuesday, the 28th of November, we're organising a big give party, and the government and some of our own donors mean that anyone on that day who chooses to give anything at all, £1, £2, £5, it'll be doubled that day. Now that's a good investment, isn't it? We need large networks of ordinary people who've got modest means putting in a very small amount and watching it be doubled. The second point I'm going to just make briefly, and by the way, Mark is going to be giving out some cards. Here, we're giving you this free, a card with a picture and an address on it, so that any of you who want to hear the news can sign up. It's waterproof. Keep it next to your heart. Never take a shower without this being next to your heart. It's going to move you.
I would like you to put your hands to our speaker. Thank you very much. To our respondents, Alko, Richard, and Hakeem. And to John and Justin. Thank you.